First and foremost, I want to welcome everyone to District Heights. I am the Commissioner of District Heights, Jonathan Medlock, one of the commissioners here, and also our Commissioner, Harriet Irving, is here. Somewhere, here she is. Stand up for us. Wonderful. The Honorable Jack Sims, he's away. Vice Mayor Eddie Martin, and our Commissioner, Cynthia Miller. I do apologize. First and foremost, once again, welcome to this town hall on violence prevention. We're not only going to talk about the violence and what's going on, but we're going to talk about the solutions and how to move forward. One of the biggest things that we've been talking about, and I know me and Aisha talk at great lengths about the issue of violence and what needs to be done, and this is why this town hall is taking form and taking shape. For us, as public officials, myself, being a commissioner, there's a public outcry for help in what's going on. So there is no time like the present. We wanted to do this earlier when there were some hot times in the city, but this is the time to talk about it, and we're going to get started. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Aisha Braveboy to moderate this particular program for us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Commissioner. And thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. My name is Aisha Braveboy, and I represented Prince George's County for 8 years in the Maryland House of Delegates in District 25. And I see one of my good friends and delegate from District 25, Ms. Angela Angel, is here. Please stand up. We also have from our Democratic Central Committee, Reverend Jamila Woods Jones from the Democratic Central Committee is here. Reverend Jones actually works tirelessly in our community in the area of mental health. And on Saturday, September 9th, she will be holding the second annual Faith and Mental Health Conference. We will put this on our Facebook page and we'll send it around to everyone, and we'll also email it out to the room so that you all can attend that event as well. Am I missing anyone that I needed to introduce this evening? I know that we have folks here from the command staff of the police department who the chief will be introducing, and there will be others who will be speaking this evening who you'll get to know. So we decided to host this meeting tonight to begin a conversation about crime and what we can do together to reduce crime and violence in our county. As you know, we have experienced, a lot of very violent crimes recently. Now, that doesn't mean that all of our stats are going up. It just means that there have been upticks in some months of violent events occurring in our community. And we want to talk to those who are responsible for developing strategies to reduce crime and to prevent crime in our communities, to be able to present to us, what they have done, what they've learned, what are the best practices in ensuring that those who are responsible for assisting all of us and keeping us safe are doing whatever they need to do to keep us safe. So we're not here tonight to point fingers or to blame anyone for anything. We are here to find solutions. And so tonight we'll have two panels. Our first panel is a law enforcement panel, and our second panel is a panel of community and mental health professionals who will talk about solutions and how the community can get involved in violence prevention. First, I'd like to introduce our first panel. We have our wonderful police chief, Hank Stawinski. He's the chief of the Prince George's County Police Department, and we have a 1,700 member department. Chief Stawinski has over 25 years of law enforcement experience with the department and has held several leadership positions throughout his career, including heading the Patrol Division and the Bureau of Forensic Science and Intelligence. And I can tell you personally, I know Hank Stawinski. He met me when I was much younger, and he was a little younger. And we kind of grew up in service together, and I am very grateful to the partnership that we've been able to develop over the years. So what I think I'll do now is allow you to give your opening presentation, and then I'll introduce the next panelist.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening. I will begin with a broad overview of some things, and then really I'm receptive to your questions, because that's what my presence here tonight is about, answering particular questions. From a broad overview perspective, I have been serving for 25 years, but my family has been part of this institution called the Prince George's County Police Department for 61 years. I'm not from someplace else. I'm born and raised in Prince George's County. This is my home. One of the people who led me to lead this institution is sitting to my left on the panel. That's Chief Melvin High, now Sheriff High. And one of my best good friends there, Mr. Dr. Spencer, always offered me the benefit of his wisdom as we were having those conversations about, if you had the opportunity to lead an institution like the department, how would you go about that? So what we embarked upon 7 years ago was a complete restructuring of the institution. What we found as we looked critically at it was that we were functioning through structures that had been put in place in the 1970s, 1980s, and we really hadn't changed those structures very much. Coming out of the Department of Justice Memorandum of Agreement and Consent Decree, we had tremendous opportunities to look critically at those structures and those business practices and begin to change them. So we reoriented the department to prevention. And coming back to the question of strategy, because I know that's one of the topics that we want to cover tonight, we have one strategy. Our strategy is prevent crime. But we do that in a unique way. What we've done is we've moved to operating the department in real time. So we no longer set up a 7-day strategy, a 14-day strategy, a 30-day strategy, a summer strategy. What we do is, using 3 documents that we've developed over the last several years, is we run the department at 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right now as we're sitting having this conversation, and we're constantly adjusting and reallocating our resources, because that's how you get the best benefit, and that's how you interrupt crime from occurring. So the product of that is that 7 years ago, I was the Chief of Staff to Chief McGaw, newly appointed Chief of Police. I'd like to introduce to you my Chief of Staff, Jackie Raftery. Jackie, stand up for a second. And then while I'm at it, since I was invited to do so, I'll introduce to you Deputy Chief George Nichols, who now runs the Bureau of Forensic Science and Intelligence. Captain O'Lear, who is the Assistant Commander of District 3. And Mr. John McGroarty, who is my ombudsman. And any of them are available to answer any questions that you might have. So at that point, we had every day in Prince George's County 103 reported UCR crimes, every day. Every day we had 103 crimes. We began that restructuring process, and I'll keep it not limited to, but focused on the policing side of this. The other half of our solution lies in the Transforming Neighborhoods Initiative. Okay, that's the police officer no longer being an enthusiastic amateur and trying to solve complex social services, medical, infrastructure problems, right? And that's been tremendously successful for us. But in that restructuring, we began to move towards operating in real time. And these other documents that we talked about were developed during that process. So 7 years ago, every day, 103 crimes in Prince George's County. As I stand here today, we closed 2016 every day with an average of 48 crimes every day. Every year for 7 years, it's gone down incrementally. So from 103 to 48. We are 2/3 of the way through the year, and we're sitting at 49 crimes a day. So it's important, as we have these conversations, to distinguish between the fear of crime and the facts of crime. Violent crime now in the unincorporated and larger portions of Prince George's County that the 1,700 people Aisha spoke of are responsible for is down another couple percent. We're down in every category of robbery right now. Homicides are even. We did have some tragic events occur at the beginning of this month, and I was looking for a way, because we've been talking about this forum for a couple weeks now, to convey to you why that might be happening. And I've said on camera, you might have seen me on television saying, I know the community has questions about this, and frankly, I'm hard-pressed to find a good answer when I look at the pathology of these crimes. So as I'm coming here tonight, I'm merging onto a road, 2-lane road, one-way in each direction. And because of the structure of that roadway, you've got to merge. So I make the turn and I move forward to the point where I'm supposed to merge, and the gentleman in a car behind me is now speeding up because he can't tolerate the idea that I'm going to merge in front of him. And then he gets next to me and he's pointing and he's hollering. Traffic stops, I move forward and I merge, and he continues to do that. And the irony of all of that is that if you look in front of us, there's nothing but traffic for a mile. It's a one-lane road and we're going nowhere. And that really encapsulated for me this frustration that has run through these crimes at the beginning of this month that I'm alluding to. In the vast majority of those cases, those are people who had known each other for a long period of time. They had been in conflict with one another for a long period of time, and then they decided to resolve that by taking violent action. A goodly number of those people were actually involved in committing a crime when they lost their lives. So the point is, from a crime fact perspective, we're doing well. And we're actually flat for this year compared to last year, which again is a more than 50% reduction over 7 years. From a fear perspective, I certainly empathize with the concern when we see what we see on TV. And I'm particularly heartbroken when I look at what happened to those 3 young girls at the end of last week. And then that was piled on top of what we saw in Barcelona, Spain, a week before that. That same night, 6 police officers were shot in the United States of America, and 2 of them died. These are very difficult times for the men and women who do this job. And the chief and the sheriff, I'm sure, are going to allude to that. Donnell is certainly no stranger to that, and you'll hear that from them. But as I conclude my opening remarks to you, again, I'm asking for the community's support for the men and women who are out there on your behalf every day. I'm very proud of what they do, and I'm very proud of how they do that. And we're continuing to work and look for those precursor behaviors, both in terms of policing and in terms of violence. Domestic violence is a fundamental platform in my administration, certainly in the sheriff's administration. I know the chief feels strongly about it. I know the state's attorney and the state's attorney's office feels strongly about it. But that's where we need to not be the enthusiastic amateur and craft policing solutions to what are social, psychological, and in a lot of cases, unfortunately, mental health problems. But that, again, is why I'm here talking to you and looking for those people that I can collaborate with so we can continue to improve our service delivery and turn to subject matter experts that will, again, prevent these things from happening in the first place. So with that, I'll conclude and turn it back over. It's a privilege to be here, and obviously I'll answer any questions you have when we get to that part.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chief. I'd next like to bring up Chief Elliot Gibson. Chief Gibson is the chief of the District Heights Police Department. Chief Gibson has been the chief here since 2014. He has a long and distinguished career in law enforcement, having started his career at the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. He has also served as a patrol officer, criminal investigator, evidence technician, patrol sergeant, supervisor, police training instructor, among other leadership and management roles. And so it's an honor to be here in your city, Chief, and we'd like you to make some opening statements.
Good evening. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Elliot Gibson. I'm the chief of police here in the city of District Heights. I've been in this business of law enforcement and public safety for a very, very long time. You could call me an old man, but I've learned a lot as I've moved through my law enforcement career. I started out in Washington, D.C., as she mentioned in the bio, and I've learned a lot of things about law enforcement officers as well as people. And what I'm going to try to do today, and some of the members of the panel, is we're going to have these conversations with a view toward having all of you understand some of the dynamics of crime, public safety, and violence. And hopefully we'll get to some of the root causes and identify some solutions. I got an email yesterday from this panel that looks at crime and disorder around the United States as well as the state of Maryland. They say, congratulations, Chief. The city of District Heights has been certified as one of the safest cities in the state of Maryland. I said, wow. they had a list of the 20 safest cities. The city of District Heights was number 5 on that list. And so we would say, well, wow, how do you get to be number 5 on a list where there are hundreds and hundreds of cities and towns in the state of Maryland? Well, it's everybody collectively trying to make a difference. Those residents, our business partners, and the police are talking. When I came into this office in 2014, I made a pact with our elected officials that we were going to be transparent, that we were also going to share information about what's going on in our community, as well as make ourselves available to receive that information. We've received a lot of information that allows the police department as well as the government to know what's going on. You can't just hope you get it right. You got to have that communication line open so that someone who sees something or hears something can reach out and tell you what's going on. I get calls on my cell phone, 3 o'clock in the morning. Chief, I came out, I was looking at the ground in front of my house, I saw a condom. I just wanted you to know. Now I could have hung the phone up. I said, what's your address? We're going to send somebody through there. There may be criminal activity afoot. They're calling the chief. I don't have a problem with that because we need to know whether it's something very serious, a routine call for police service, or something minor. I'll make a decision about whether it's an emergency. I'll pass it on. I wanted to keep that line of communication open. We're going to be talking about violence. And when we start talking about violence, we start talking about violent people, violent crimes in our community. What can you do if you think that there's violent activity going on in the community? Who's doing these kinds of crimes? What causes somebody to be very aggressive or violent? We have a lot of answers, but we also want to hear from you. Y'all might hear this word come up quite a bit during this conversation. The word is empathy. Anybody know about that? You heard that before? Empathy. Some folks in our society have no empathy. They wouldn't care whether you suffered or not. They would shoot, stab, run over you in an automobile, and any of these other kinds of things to achieve whatever their end is. No empathy. They don't care one way or the other. But we have to try and identify some of those individuals in our community. A lot of our folks who live and work in our community know who these individuals are. We went up to the school, District Heights Elementary School, a few months back. They called us. There was a disorderly subject in the school. We sent the police up. The individual was 5 years old. He's jumping up and down. He's cursing, making a lot of noise. Wait a minute. How does a 5-year-old get to that point? Very aggressive. A 5-year-old cursing? He just can barely talk. But some of those tendencies we see because of, y'all know that some of these things are learned behavior. Comes from a lack of parental training, individuals, environment, and a lot of other factors. And we're going to start getting into some of those things. But I just want you to know it starts at a very young age. Individuals don't start being aggressive at 50. Those same folks are aggressive at 8, 9, and 10 years old when they're in an environment where they're not being properly managed. Those are some of the things that we're going to get into. Again, I thank all of you for coming out to the city of District Heights, and we'll have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Next, I'll bring up my very, very good friend, Melvin High. I think I was one of the first people who met then Chief High when he was being confirmed by the county council, and my job was to make sure that he got confirmed. And since that confirmation, we've been truly blessed to have him serving us. Sheriff High was elected to be the Prince George's County Sheriff in 2010 and leads the 300-member office. Sheriff High served as chief of the Prince George's County Police Department from 2003 to 2008. Throughout his distinguished career, Sheriff High has served as chief of the Norfolk, Virginia Police Department and worked as an officer for the Washington Metropolitan Police Department. So thank you so much, my friend, for being here, and I'll hand you over the mic.
Thank you, Ms. Brayboy. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be here with you, certainly with my colleagues in public safety. Before I make a few comments, I want to introduce Mr. Mark Spencer, who's here with me. He served with me when I was in the police department and now over in the sheriff's office. And Ms. Sharon Taylor is here with me as well. She helps to make sure that we're able to communicate, share that message. You know, in terms of this issue of crime, it's been studied over and over and over and over again. Throughout our country and throughout the world. I guess some of the most recent studies of crime have been done locally here by a professor by the name of Lawrence at the University of Maryland. And Professor Lawrence did a 480-page report on crime prevention. What works, what doesn't work, some of the promising practices of crime. He wrote that report on behalf of the National Institute of Justice for their presentation to the Congress. Congress provides a lot of resources for our national public safety officials as well as local government as well. And so Congress wanted to know what was working so that they spent their money correctly. And so he did this report, and the interesting thing is that while crime had been studied by many people and all of us were engaged in implementing various strategies, et cetera, you've heard of things like community policing and problem-oriented policing, those kind of strategies and philosophies, but there wasn't much research to show whether they worked or not. And so they undertook to try to define what worked. Crime kind of comes in two things. One, on this sawtooth process of crime as it goes forward in time, we have moments of spike, so that maybe homicides, maybe robberies, or some other kind of crime spike for a moment in time. And the best response to that is the immediate tactics and strategy and resources that our public safety officials apply to that to get ahead of that so that spike doesn't become a trend. And so we can stop that momentary thing from occurring. But in terms of real crime prevention is a long-term proposition. And this long-term proposition of crime prevention requires everybody to be on deck. It requires all hands. And so there's a phrase that's been coined called community-oriented government, where all of our institutions, all of our government institutions, from schools to all of our public safety officials, to our health department, to everything that you can imagine that provides human services, have to be involved. But critically beyond that formal government, it requires the community. The community is a critical, vital piece. And in that community piece, the most vital is the family. Chief Gibson mentioned earlier about some of the young people who are either victims or perpetrators of crime, and how that has become a learned thing. Well, we can overcome that by having strong families that give good directions to our young people as they grow and develop. And so that's a long-term proposition. So when I became the police chief a few years ago, I certainly looked at what people were saying of the things that you do to prevent crime in the long term and also to address those spikes. And one of the things that is required is that at times we have to extend and intensify our policing effort, apply the right strategies, etc. But for that to work, we have to have a good partnership and a good relationship with the community, with the people that we are policing. So one of the things that's required is that we build trust. And so much of the work that I did in the police departments, wherever I've been, is the work to build community trust between law enforcement and our citizens, so that our citizens do the things that help us to get ahead of those spikes and ultimately get ahead of crime and to, over time, have it go down in the right direction, so that they're willing to talk to us and to share information and to help and to do those kinds of things that we know that work. So that's an important piece of what we do. And so we have to have all of us on deck to do that. Very critical. Then what we have to do is prioritize violent crime and violent offenders. Those are the people that cause most of the harm and hurt in our community. But there is a small number of that group of folk in our communities. And so we have to be focused on who that is and develop specific strategies and tactics to address that violent person who is going to continue to commit violence until they are apprehended and treated and helped. Not always incarceration, but getting the right help that they need. In the case of America today, we have a significant mental health issue. And many people who are involved in crime, particularly violent crime, have mental health issues. And so that's another one of the institutions that we must have that will work well to help us alter that path so that that's not a repeated thing. Because if we arrest that person and send them to jail for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, they're going to get out. And when they come back, if they haven't been effectively treated and developed, help to improve whatever the circumstances that exist in their life, they're going to repeat on that. So that's an important piece in terms of addressing that issue. And then the last thing I'll say to you is addressing the street level disorder, etc. Because part of what happens in our communities is we have fear, where people are not readily willing to go out and take advantage of that community and all of the things that that community has to offer because they fear something in their neighborhood. And so we always have to be focused on how we address that issue so we can reduce fear so that people then can go about a positive life. So that's a very critical factor, is that we work on all of those things that raise the level of fear. I'll take questions at the right time.
Thank you so much, Sheriff. Before I introduce our last panelist, I just want to thank Rachel Jones, who's the field representative for Benjamin Cardin, for being here this evening. Our last panelist for this panel is Donnell Turner. He is the Deputy Chief State's Attorney, and he's here representing our wonderful State's Attorney, Angela Also Brooks, who had some other engagements this evening, but has been a true partner with the community as well. And so we invite Mr. Turner to speak.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be fairly brief. I didn't realize I was going to be up here with this distinguished panel here, and I appreciate Aisha for inviting me up here. I guess I'm probably the only prosecutor in the room, so she probably felt sorry for me and invited me to come up here. But I do appreciate having an opportunity to sit up here and have this discussion about crime prevention. What we've realized at the State's Attorney's Office is that we cannot prosecute our way out of the crime that we have in this county. And so what we've tried to do, and Sheriff Hyde talked about going after the most violent offenders, the violent repeat offenders, and that's certainly something that we spend a lot of time doing. What we've seen is that those are the folks, it's a small number of folks who typically, who generally commit the majority of significant crimes in our community. So that's a priority of ours as well at the State's Attorney's Office. But we also understand the importance of crime prevention, and so what we've done the last several years under Ms. Alsobrook's administration is we've spent a lot of time looking at ways to get out into the community and connect with people in the community and figure out ways to stop crime before it occurs. And so we've come up with a number of initiatives in the State's Attorney's Office. We've focused, for instance, on young people and truancy in our schools. We've created programs such as what we call I Belong Here, which is a truancy program. It's an incentive program that we created for where we've gone into several middle schools, and we've created a sort of a competition for several schools to compete with each other and see. And we've actually gone to the schools with the highest truancy rates, and we've done really a tremendous job bringing down the truancy rate by creating this program that's created incentives for the students to go to school. And so what we've done is we've given awards, and we've had pep rallies and all these things that the students have really responded to. And so that's one example of what we've done to focus on and try to create better quality of life for our citizens, and to deal with the issues in our community before they get to the point where they start thinking about committing crime. We have a lot of diversion programs in our office as well. We have diversion programs having to do with mental health. We have a veterans court. We have a drug diversion program. We also have a program which we created a couple of years ago, which is called Back on Track. I'm sorry? A little louder? Okay. So we've created just a couple of years ago, we created another diversion program, which we're very proud of and has been doing very well. It's called Back on Track. And our Back on Track program is actually modeled after a program that was created in San Francisco by Kamala Harris, who's now a senator in California. And when she was the Attorney General in California, she started this program to focus on, is that better? I'm sorry. To focus on first-time, low-level drug dealers. So we already have a diversion program that focuses on folks who have drug problems or drug addictions, but they sell drugs to feed their habit. But we've created a program for those who are selling drugs for economic reasons, low-level drug dealers, and we're putting people in these programs, and we're incorporating things like education and job improving and creating job skills and that sort of thing, and so it's been a real success. So we continue to look for ways to reach the community, to improve quality of life, so that we have fewer crimes to have to address, the few people that we have to prosecute. We realize that we are a part of this community. We realize that we're invested in this community, and that the only way that we're going to get to improve the community, the only way the community is going to get better, is if we work together with the people in the community to make that happen. So again, I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to be up here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and I really want to thank all of our partners in law enforcement. And what I have enjoyed hearing from each and every one of them is, they weren't talking about law and order. They were talking about safety and community partnerships. And to me, this country is moving in such a wonderful direction in terms of the conversations around how to keep our communities truly safe and not just simply to penalize people. One of those people who have that same mindset is my good friend Mel Franklin, who's the former chair of the Prince George's County Council, so we really appreciate him for being here. I'm going to ask the first question, but I invite any individual who has a question for this panel to come up to the mic here and ask their question. But the first question I'm going to throw out there to all of you is the issue of domestic violence has been very challenging, I think, for our communities. It's really tough for our families. It's really tough to look at and listen to. And I want to know from each of you, each of your agencies, what role are you playing? And can you tell me, what percentage of our homicides and also our violent crime is a result of some form of domestic violence? So I don't know who wants to start.
Domestic violence is a challenge for us in our community. The unfortunate thing is Prince George's County leads our state in terms of domestic violence. Since the early 2000s, the county has been working in tandem to address this issue. The Sheriff's Office, in partnership with most of public safety and our county administration, has been working to raise awareness. One of the things we recognized a few years ago is that every person that's in a domestic violence situation does not even realize they're in a domestic violence situation. And so they can't ask for help or get the right help if they don't understand what's happening to them. And so the county undertook to raise awareness, to make sure that people understood what was happening and how they could get help and where the help was. And then in the Sheriff's Office, in addition to responding to calls from people who have a domestic violence issue, we also added another component called our special advocates. Our advocates are there to do follow-up from the services that people need to make sure that the right services for that person are addressed to them so that they can hopefully break the cycle of domestic violence. And so that's a real challenge. And so we've been working hard at that. The last piece that's come online that we are partnering most of your government as well as some private practitioners are part of is the Family Justice Center. The Family Justice Center is located there in Upper Marlboro, and it provides the full range of services so that a person can come there and get access to all of the services they need to address their domestic or family violence situation. And they don't have to go all around town to try to find the services that they need. And so they get expert assistance and help in that process. So I'm very glad that that's come online, and it's doing very great work. One of the shortfalls that we have in Prince George's County is having sufficient resources as it relates to bed spaces, so that when people have an issue and a need to move out of where they are, their present residence, and need to move to a safer location, we have at times insufficient bed spaces for people to go to. One of the things we corrected that I'm very proud of is that some time ago, if you were a woman with teenage children, you couldn't go to the shelter, or you couldn't take the children to the shelter. And that's been corrected. So I want to applaud Family Crisis Center for making that change, and so people are not turned away because of that.
Extraordinarily briefly, and the sheriff did a great job of covering the Family Justice Center. We have a command officer assigned there, and we rotate our detectives through there. But going back to that piece about restructuring, when we look critically at the issues that were impacting our community, one of the things that we did a couple years ago under Chief McGaugh was establish the Domestic Violence Investigations Unit. And to answer your question about how large a part does domestic violence play in our homicide factor, what we've seen consistently and troubling is that domestic violence-related homicides consistently, no matter what our overall homicide rate are about 20 to 25 events across that population. So we might have, going back to several years ago, more than 100 homicides. We might have 54 homicides, but that number is fixed between 20 and 25 as these years go by. And the tragic part of that, and this is why I appreciate coming full circle to the Family Justice Center, the work the sheriff's done, and the Domestic Violence Investigations Unit, is that when we learn of those incidents of domestic violence before they get to the homicide, we're able to intervene. And what the Family Justice Center does is it takes the stigma away from domestic violence. And it provides those services in a comprehensive way and in a safe atmosphere. And that wasn't always the case. There was a time when, going back to that restructuring, those cases were handled by station-level detectives who were handling thefts and breaking and enterings and everything else. And that's one of the ways we've sought to improve that. And I will suggest that that work collectively by the people you see here is what's bringing that number down incrementally, but we have a long way to go.
Domestic violence. A lot of times we go too far down the road talking about solutions, and some folks don't really understand what domestic violence is. If a child hits a parent, it's domestic violence. Boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, nephew, uncle, there's a relationship that there is between the two folks. And when there is striking, threats, and all of those kinds of things, it's a domestic violence incident. A lot of you know folks who are involved in these kind of incidents, but you decide you would let them, the person who's involved, call the police if they think it's necessary. You can call too. And that's what we're trying to drive home. This will be the third year the city of District Heights has hosted a domestic violence summit in the city. We bring in a lot of speakers and we bring in a lot of victims to talk candidly about their experiences, that you might gain some knowledge and understanding about what to do if you are a victim or know someone who is. Then we start the process. We're first responders. We want folks to know, if you have an incident, call. If you hear of an incident, call. We will come out, we will do the right thing. We will make the referrals, we will make sure that we follow up on all of those things. But everybody has to understand what domestic violence is in our society. Because when you decide, if any of you came last year, one of the first things that I had was a PowerPoint presentation with a woman with a black eye and somebody's doing this. That is what has happened in our society. Folks aren't talking about it. It's private. It's family. We need to bring it out. It's violence. It shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't have to stand for it in your family, whether you're the victim or you're a relative or a friend. Report those kinds of things. We'll take the next step. Thank you.
This is the beginning of the solution, that we come together and have the conversations, and sometimes the difficult conversations. The question that well, let me start by making a statement. I heard you all talking about crime, and I hear you talking about domestic violence. One of the things that we fail to realize is that mental health is the reason behind every crime that's committed. A healthy mind does not commit crime. All of us have thought about things we wanted to do to people. Am I the only one in the room? But a healthy mind causes us to think and be balanced and make the correct decisions. When a mind is off balance, it can't process, or it doesn't have empathy. You understand? These are what cause crimes to be committed, any kind of crime. My concern is that mental health is not just the elephant in the room, it's the 800-pound gorilla sitting on the elephant in the room. We all acknowledge mental health. We all talk about health, and we all have programs that work on physical health, but health is physical and mental. We make an emphasis on physical health. There are so many programs now that have been put into place. Mental health first aid, many people don't know what it is. Many of you do, because we are trying to pick it up in our area, but many people don't realize that you have an 80% higher chance of using mental health first aid than you ever have of using CPR. It's something that police officers need, prison wardens need, judges need, lay people need, clergy need, school teachers need. What are you all doing in the county to help to find a solution, one of which I just mentioned, mental health first aid, that really can teach people why it's not okay to say, shh. I come from a faith community, so I believe the scripture says people perish for lack of knowledge. What do we do to help people know that there are things that we can do that we don't have to be professionals to help people to make right decisions?
One, we have a tremendously talented woman by the name of LaJoy Preston who runs our psychological services. She comes out to all our major incidences with me and informally and in a subtle way allows people to have catharsis around some of those events and some things that maybe not be in front of them. We're expanding that. We have expanded we refer to them as our mobile crisis teams with Affiliated Asante. They respond to those crisis events, and they're there both for the officers and for the victims. So it's a two-sided equation there. The last thing, very quickly, that I'll talk about is what you're talking about that psychological first aid. I had a conversation in my office a couple weeks ago with a gentleman who is representing a group that provides training on that, and the people who are providing that training are former military officers. And so we're looking at that as a way to further increase the capacity of our own officers to process this. And I sent an email to the entire department Saturday talking about the ignorance and violence we saw in Charlottesville, talking about Barcelona, Spain, talking about the 3 children that we lost in our community, talking about the 6 police officers who were shot, 2 of them being buried today in Florida, and explaining that if you're feeling as though there's a lot there, it's understandable. And the entire department, beginning with me, is here to support you. And then we went through all of those resources available to those police officers so that people know. But in that message, I specifically said, to your point, no one knows who we are and what we do better than we do. So you back each other up on the street, back each other up off the street too. Talk to one another, ask questions, and worry about one another.
My name is Tyrese Robinson, and I'm the chair of the Neighborhood Watch Committee in Mount Rainier, Maryland, and a member of the CERT team as well. One of the things that I've been working tirelessly on in my time in Mount Rainier is getting community members more involved in our Neighborhood Watch program. If you see something, say something, that you are your neighbor's keeper, that, you know, not only when your neighbor goes out of town, but also when there's just something fishy going on. If the dog's barking, there usually is a reason why. My question today is in reference to an outline for a neighborhood watch or community connection program that gets everyone involved and feels as if they have a say in what's going on. Right now, we've seen an uptick in violence in Mount Rainier, and a lot of people are quite frankly scared and just unsure as to how we go. So as I go forward with energizing our neighborhood watch, are we looking at a model now that's more traditional with orange hats and flashlights, or are there something that's, you know, a little bit more avant-garde or new that's going on that you guys have seen across the county that may be able to give some energy to our communities as we try to band together for a watch program?
All of those programs have value. What I'll say is that we're trying to capitalize on the value of this as a communication tool. And I'll just say briefly, again, I'm the chief of police, one of the largest police departments in the country. The sheriff and the chief both served on one of the largest police departments in the country. I'm uncomfortable with citizens getting too engaged just because of that guy who, like I said, cut me off and he's mad at me because all I'm trying to do is merge in traffic. That's how delicate this guy's ego is, right? So having an open and swift line of communication, and I'm going to turn it over to Chief Gibson because he's got it right. And I get the same thing, but I think he's better prepared to answer this question in terms of an intense local community piece.
Yes.
But don't lose that passion. Continue to do, but look for novel ways to use this and those sort of interconnections with those local police officers. Our answer to that is next door. It's a neighborhood by neighborhood. But I'm going to turn it over to Chief Gibson for his perspective on that local community policing, neighborhood watch approach.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your question, first of all. I can come over there and help you get going if necessary.
Please do.
The first step in this process is to have a good understanding in your community about crime and disorder. You can go in and you can ask the chief in your municipal building, hey, can you give me every week a statistical report that shows, that's where you start, what crimes, where the crimes were occurring, and a perspective over a period of time. Because you don't have a pattern if you're just looking at one crime. But if you look at crime over time or disorder over time, you'll see, wow, there have been a number of homes broken into. We need to do something about that. A lot of folks come home, go in the house, they don't look back for 1 second. But as soon as something happens to them, oh, they want to sound the alarm. They're running up and down the street trying to gather folks who, will listen. You start by getting the information. If your community has a newsletter, ask the city to put information in the newsletter about a gathering where the police have to report to your residents and business partners what's going on. And one of the things we do here in the city of District Heights, we have the officers present the information, because that's a down and dirty look of what actually is going on right now, as opposed to some perspective about what has happened 6 months ago and a year ago. The officers are saying, here's what happened yesterday, here's what happened last night. Then you build on it. So you might have a meeting that the police are sponsoring, where you ask as many folks as come out, 10 people will come. You say, that's fine. Put your names down, give me an email address. Next week or next month, we want you to come back again. We're going to talk about new crime and disorder. Bring a friend. Yes. The friend, bring a friend. Before you know it, you'll have 50 or 60 people. Let's take a look at this environment. I'm not sure how long we have been advertising. I expected the parking lot to be backed up all the way out to Kipling Parkway. You do it for a football game, and we got 3 or 4 dozen folks in here. This place ought to be packed to hear this valuable information. You have to start small and you build. Everybody has to be concerned. Everybody doesn't necessarily have the same level of concern. You want the officers involved, your business partners, and those who live and work in that particular community. If you have to go door to door, what we started doing, I had the officers, anybody can send an email out. I had the officers knocking on doors. Hey, here's a flyer, share with your neighbor. And we go block for block for block. We had a stack like this we're passing out. We got 50 or 60 people. We passed out 300 flyers. We got to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. Folks have to want to become involved, and then you build on it. Okay?
Thank you so much.
All right.
Ma'am, the State's Attorney's Office has a program called Community in the Courthouse, and this is a program where we invite community leaders, members of the business community to the State's Attorney's Office on a monthly basis, and we normally pick a topic surrounding public safety, law enforcement. We usually we have speakers come and give presentations, but it's a great opportunity for community leaders, for community watch groups, leaders like yourself to come together and network and talk about the things that they're doing in their communities. And so I can give you my card after we're done, and I'll connect you with the folks in our office who are responsible for that program. But what it does, again, is it brings everyone together and allows them to network and to really share ideas about, in terms of coming up with ways, innovative ways to keep an eye on crime in our community. Okay.
First person who will be speaking, and I'll ask for each panelist to provide brief remarks, and then we can jump right into questions, is Dr. Natosha Spate. Dr. Spate is a clinical psychologist with extensive experience in counseling people about overcoming the effects of trauma-related violence. She currently provides mental health treatment to youth detained in the Waxter Children's Center in Laurel. So, Dr. Spate.
Hello to everyone. Please let me know if I need to speak up if you cannot hear me. Just a little brief about me. Every day I have the opportunity to work with amazing, amazing young people. That's the perspective that I have. Sometimes it's not the perspective that everyone else has because they are actually incarcerated. Still cannot hear me? Is that better? That's better. Okay, great. So I'll hold the mic like this, and so now I know how to communicate. So as I was stating, I work with some amazing young people. That is my perspective of them. Not everyone sees them that way, however, because they are currently incarcerated. However, every day we refer to them as scholars. So they are scholars. They are also debaters. They are poets. They are innovators. They are athletes. They are future community leaders. They are awesome young people who have committed crimes. But that does not define who they are because they are still amazing people. I have been working, I work at New Beginnings. So it's the old Oak Hill for those of you who are familiar, but I work at New Beginnings and I've been working there for 4 years in that particular facility, and I've been doing this work as a clinician for 18 years. So I've been doing this for a while and I've been working with these particular young people, but I've been working with youth, families, and children and I specialize working with trauma and abuse and special education. So that's my background, and this is something that I absolutely love doing. I come to you today, I think he's going to go through, I was tasked to cover a whole lot, so I'm going to try and do it so that you guys can also see some of the things I talk about, because I may not cover everything, but at least you guys can get a visual so that you guys can see some things that I'm going to go over. So you can go to the next slide. So some things that we're going to cover today is looking at-risk youth. So I'm going to be talking about some of the psychological effects, at-risk youth in particular, as well as the violence and trauma, okay? So just think about at-risk youth, and I like to think of them as at-promise youth as well. Okay, so just some of the psychological effects when we look at trauma and violence. Youth who are in dangerous situations, in constant stressful situations, that impacts their brain. So they can have some brain impairments that happens. When that happens to them, there are some other things that occur as well. And so those are some things I want to briefly go over and briefly talk about with you guys, just really quickly. So when we look at some brain development, some things that happen after that, they can have difficulties identifying and expressing their emotions. They can be hypersensitive to sounds, touch, just lights. A lot of different things in that nature. They may experience anxiety, depression, anger concerns. Oftentimes, people can say, oh, well, they're easily triggered. They're set off by things. They're impulsive. Those kinds of things happen when your brain is impaired a little bit. Some other things, when they live in dangerous situations and environments and there's constant stress, yes, they're unpredictable. Yes, they're vigilant. Yes, they're guarded to certain things. And oftentimes they have difficulty clearly thinking about things, clearly problem solving, clearly reasoning. So those are just some of the things when we talk about some impaired brain functioning. All of those things are impacted. Those are the things that our youth, our young people are dealing with. Next slide. And so when we look at these things, this is complex trauma. These are the things that are at risk, are at promise, our young people are dealing with. And I just wanted to read you guys this statement so you guys get a clear understanding of what we're talking about and what they sometimes deal with. Children surrounded by violence in their homes and communities learn from an early age that they cannot trust, the world is not safe, and that they are powerless to change their circumstances. Having learned to operate in survival mode, the child lives from moment to moment without pausing to think about it, plan for it, or even dream about a future. Things for them are moment to moment. They don't care about anything past the right now. They don't even care about their lives. So if you think about it from the perspective of, if I don't care about my life as a young person, I definitely don't care about your life either. So think about that. That is their being. That is their existence. Okay? Some of the things that we look about, this is happening. So then how do we, as people, as adults, as the professionals, how do we then disrupt this cycle of violence that is happening? How do we intervene? We know that all children require love, nurturing, and support to thrive and break this cycle. Now, that sounds kind of, easy. However, they don't oftentimes receive those things. They don't receive that basic. However, they don't always receive that, and then on top of that, they need so much more than that. So this is what we're looking at. So some of the things that we realize is that they need these things, but they need them when they're this big. They don't need them as adolescents, and yet they're much bigger than I am, but they need them when they're here. But now we're trying to intervene when they're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, because again, we're talking about at-risk youth. But this is the age, so do we say we're just going to give up on them? No, we still have to find and try and do something. So research recommends, and Sheriff Hyde mentioned this, community involvement. That's what we need to be doing. We have to look at community activism and organizing, community programs. We have to look at family involvement and family engagement. That's where we need to work at, looking at. Another thing that, okay. Some other things that we can look at is definitely therapeutic interventions, and then looking at victim education for them as well. To wrap up, just so that you guys can get this part, I really want to have you guys understand is what you can do. The best practices piece. This is really, really key, because this is something that everyone sitting in this room can do, and this is what I really want everyone to take a look at. Value youth and believe that they're worth it. Value them. Be present, be available, go that extra mile, because so many people have failed them. Provide a support system, give them positive exposure and opportunities. Be patient as possible, because they are going to reject you. So be patient. And then communicate a consistent message that I will not give up on you. Thank you so much.
Next is Phil Lee. Phil Lee is the chairman of the Community Public Awareness Council, also known as CPAC. It is the largest juvenile diversionary program in Prince George's County. Most of the youth that participate in CPAC's programs have been charged with some misdemeanor, and Mr. Lee will talk to you a little bit about his program, just a few minutes, so that we can move on to the rest of the speakers.
So I will be brief. CPAC is a very unique organization. I think of our staff as interceptors, front-end specialists. What you've heard from many of our guest speakers are what happens afterwards. I believe intervention, prevention, and I deal with children. I believe those are the things that are most important to keep our children out of the criminal justice system. CPAC works very, very closely with Juvenile Court, Department of Juvenile Services, Prince George's County Public School System, Prince George's County Police Department, and the Office of the Sheriff. We are a very, very unique community-based organization. It has taken a lot of time to develop this. Listening to what the doctor just told you, going back to what the sheriff told you, it starts with community. We often hear, children are our future. It's a very few words, but it's a great big statement. Community is what it's all about. I spent 7 years with Melvin Howard, he was chief of police, and I'm actually assigned to the sheriff's office now. But we knew then that community had to become part of the solution. And so we set out to organize, to unite communities. What some of us realized was every child is connected to a parent. And so let's go after the parents. Over the last 16 years, CPAC has processed more than 3,800 children. That's how many children we found a way to come in contact with. As Aisha said, our children are referred to us by the Department of Juvenile Services, but it's before adjudication, not after. Our job is to keep them out of the criminal justice system. We understood a successful child is usually a child that will be productive in their community. The success started in schools. It starts in schools, so we spend a lot of time working with our educators. The doctor talked about trauma. We have to focus on that area also. We have a mental health provider who works with us with every child that comes through the program. In fact, I'll introduce her. That's Yvette Lee over there. Yvette is with Transitions. That's the name of the organization. What is CPAC's mission? To keep our children from ever engaging in negative conduct or illegal conduct. Right now, we are struggling to try to find a way to get to our children before they get into trouble. And we can do it. And we've proven that we can do it. And I guess I'll actually take this time to tell you Aisha has been a big part of what CPAC has done. We've taken a lot of energy to put together this program. So, but I do go through this. CPAC, it's a situation, was a kind of organization. The truth is, I tell most people, I can show you better than I can tell you. We do a tremendous amount with our future, your children. We work closely with the parents. We have our organization arranged so the parents must be involved. I will tell you, we meet with parents every 90 days. I will have twice as many parents at that meeting than you have here tonight. I'll have 4 times as many than you'll find at most PTA meetings. We're good at what we do. I also want to compliment the doctor. She's right. We've got great children. We've got fantastic children. But they need our help. They don't need our help sometimes. They need our help all of the time. And thank you all.
Renata Johnson is the Executive Director of Kiamsha Youth Empowerment Organization. Kiamsha is a group mentoring organization with over 25 years of experience in working with young people in Prince George's County. So, Renata.
Thank you. How y'all doing? Can you hear me? Okay, I'm gonna talk fast because I don't want to get kicked off. All right, so like she said, Kiamsha is an organization that does group mentoring. We are celebrating 25 years in Prince George's County this year, so we're thoroughly excited about that. Kiamsha is an organization that is ran by straight volunteers as well as people that are alumni of the organization. I was in the organization when I was in high school. Our Director of Communications here, Tiffany Briggs, was in Kiamsha when she was in high school. So we are here to really talk a little bit about what we do, a little bit more. All right. I can talk louder if I don't have the mic, because I'm used to talking to young people all the time, so I can talk like this if you need me to. So we meet on Monday nights at Largo High School from 7 to 9. We take 8th graders through 12th grade students. We train them for 8 months. We give them all this information. They take it, they flip it upside down, and turn it into language that they can teach their peers. We know that young people can teach other young people better than they'll ever listen to us because we don't know nothing. All right, I look young, but I'm not as young as I think I am. So they don't listen to me either. So we want to make sure that we have young people in front of them. If we decide we want to take 25 young people, when you have to teach somebody else something, you learn it in a totally different way. And when your peers are teaching you, you think it's cool, you want to pay attention, and now you have these young people that were mentees of ours that are now mentors to their peers. And so that's something that we have done for 25 years, and we're thoroughly excited about it. And over those 25 years, we've helped about 25,000 people, and I say people because you can't just talk to the child, you can't just talk to the parent. It has to be both. One of the things about Kiamsha and one of the things that I think we need to do in our community is as adults, One of the reasons why it's so hard to work with young people, because they are a mirror of your flaws. And in order to be successful with working with young people, you have got to push yourself to be better. This is not the generation of do what I say, don't do what I do. That's not them. You have got to change how you live your life, not what you say to them, not what you do in front of them, but how you live your life. We teach character development, and if you're teaching character development, you're teaching personal responsibility. If you do that, you will automatically see the rate of violence go down. So it's important for us to do that, and I wanted to take this time to also share what we do, but challenge you all in some of the things that you do. Kiamsha has also worked in the juvenile justice systems in Prince George's County and been the trainer of trainers. We make sure that we train the teachers and the mentors that are working with the young people so that they have the foundation principles that will work with these young people. Another thing is that I want to challenge you all to make a personal commitment. We talked a lot about things that you all can do as adults, but I want to know how many of y'all spoke to a young person today and just said hi. Adults are scared to talk to young people. If you treat me like I am invisible, I will do things to make sure that you see me. So this is what we have to do. So I challenge all of you all, speak to a young person tomorrow. Hey, how you doing? You don't have to carry on a long conversation because you don't know what they're going to say. But just start off with saying, hi, how you doing? How was your day? They want to be seen. They want to be heard. If we don't do it, who else is going to do it? So please make sure I have flyers to talk about what we do on Monday nights. Make sure you see me. I'm open for questions. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, our commissioner here in District Heights, Commissioner Jonathan Medlock. Commissioner Medlock was elected to the District Heights Commission in 2015.
Good evening, family. Good evening, family. Good evening. First, let me say that I love you. Can I say that? Yeah, I love you. And let me talk from the position of a resident, not a commissioner, for a minute. Being from Savannah, Georgia, the thing that I know most is community. Community first. And as a community, one of the things we need to get back to, real talk, is community. We need to start talking to each other. Can you hear me now? All right. We need to start talking to each other for real. Getting back to the basic things that worked then. If it worked then, it works now. But we've gotten away from it. My experience in coming to DC from Savannah was I go up to talk to somebody. Hey, what's going on? I don't know you. Oh, ouch. But you know, it's not about just you don't know me now, but we're kin, whether you know it or not. So I think if this panel is here to talk about solutions, what are the solutions to the problems that we're having? And I tell you, it starts with communication. We have to start talking, that's it. We're trying to do some lofty things, and all we have to do is talk and have a conversation. So in this particular hour, in this panel, we're gonna talk about what we're gonna do at the end of the day to resolve the issues that we're going through. We act as though it's so hard and it's so laborious to do the job that we need to do. It's so simple. I come from a village, so I understand what a village is. So I'm qualified to talk about it. Can we say that? I'm qualified. So let's create that village again. So one of the things that I want to talk about really, really briefly is, as a commissioner and being appointed or elected to this particular position, I was a resident first. And I saw as a resident, I know things needed to be done. So as a commissioner, I am commissioned to do the things that need to be done. It is simple as that. And you have to task me. We don't hold people really responsible. We always all the time talk about holding our elected officials accountable, but we really don't. We have to really get into them and say, look, this is what you're gonna do at the end of the day, or you gotta go. We have to be courageous enough to have the conversations. Can we do that? You know? So at the end of the day, we have to really become the change we want to see. We have to move, people. We have to move. We have to be passionate about it, and we have to be serious. I ought to say that playtime is over. Can we say that? It is over. I'm tired of playing with the politicians. I know I may look like a politician now, but I started in as an organizer with the National Black United Front. It's about business. It's grassroots organizing. We have to bring it to politics. We have to bring it to our elected leaders to say we are sick and tired. Are you serious? Sick and tired of the same things over and over and over again. And we keep having the same conversations, and why? I know Aisha's gonna get me off the mic, but we're gonna talk about some smoothies now, okay?
This issue of trauma, a couple of speakers have mentioned it. And I want to know, in your experience with children, because really, children who are traumatized grow up to be traumatized adults. And I think one of the reasons we're focusing on children now is because that's where we have the greatest opportunity to make a difference. But again, this issue of trauma permeates throughout our communities. Can you tell me, like, what are some of the signs that you've seen in the programs that you deal with of young people who have experienced trauma? And then I, again, invite those of you who are interested in asking questions to come up to the mic so that you can ask questions of this panel. So I don't know who wants to start.
Yeah, I'll be brief because I believe the doctor probably has the better answer. One of the things you've heard a lot about this evening is domestic violence. Domestic violence in the home, it will affect any child. And we know that domestic violence, in most cases, is a learned behavior. We have children who come to school angry because they've been up all night long listening to somebody's downstairs tearing the house apart. And when they get to school, they are sleep deprived, they're angry, and as children, they are ready to strike out at the first person that comes their way. So I think one thing, you've heard it, but when we talk about domestic violence, people tend to think about adults. Domestic violence between boyfriend and girlfriend, big problem. Big problem. Because of the learned behavior. The young man who says, well, I slapped her because I told her to sit down and she wouldn't listen. What do you think he learned of that? So for us, when we go back to intervention and prevention, somehow we've got to turn that child around because as far as I'm concerned, he is traumatized. This thing he went through has taken a toll on him as a young person.
Trauma can present differently. I just want to highlight this between girls and boys. And sometimes people think that it looks the same. My mic is making noises. But let me just say it again. Oh, I'm so sorry. But just let me say, sometimes you can see impulsive behaviors, you can see angry behaviors, sometimes look like they have an attitude about something, but then sometimes on the other hand, they can just be withdrawn, say nothing, be totally disengaged, not talk to you about things. So you're not always gonna see the same things. Girls, on the other hand, just because women, we communicate a lot. So we might see a lot of loud, a lot of verbal, a lot of vocal, a lot of angry things that are more like this kind of stuff, because in women in general, not to say anything about men, we are just more verbal and communicative expressively by nature. So that is what you might see from girls. But the different things present differently, but more so what you want to look for is a change in their behavior. If they were she came to school one day or she came home one day and she was happy, her behaviors were, just content, she was doing something, and then the next day or the next couple of weeks, her behaviors all of a sudden changed, there's likely something going on that may have been a traumatic situation or a traumatic event. Notice changes in behavior for trauma. Just look for those kinds of things.
I also work with foster care children, and so they are some of our most vulnerable children in the community. And what I know is they have a lot of, I won't say a lot, they have some services that's helping them deal with their trauma. On the other hand, they also need people that treat them like children. And so when I talk to these traumatized foster care children, I treat them like they're any other child, like they're a leader, you're a scholar, and all of that. So some of the things that you all can do, as if you don't have the credentials to really deal with all their trauma, you don't want to open up boxes that you're not able to close, but how do you just interact with a child that has experienced some trauma? And some of that, just dealing with teenagers in general. Find out what they're interested in and be interested in that, because that's how you're going to be able to communicate with them. Respect them. That's a big thing for teenagers, and learn what respect means to them so that you can ensure you're not disrespecting them on accident. Talk to them, we already talked about that, believe in them, and then meeting them where they are. They may not be ready to talk to you about everything. We don't want to share all of our trauma with people we don't know, so they're not going to be ready to share it with you. But if you can create that environment when they come to the doctor, they can talk to her because they also feel safe in other places. And we are raised more than just by our parents that live in our household. If we are a village, then we all have a responsibility. If we're all playing a part, they will be better and be ready to be on the healing track when they come to the doctor's office. So our job is to make sure they're good on the outside so that she can work with the inside.
So, of course, I'm still on the track of mental health, because that's who I am. And you all talk about some tremendous things. I think trauma systems therapy is one of the best things that happened to us now, because it teaches people, instead of asking what's wrong with you, because that's the question we already asked, we now ask what happened. My question is, my concern is, I do the work. Every type of population you talk about, I work with. How do we teach the average person? The average person, because guess what? The young person that you're working with, that you're trying to help, if they're going back home to people who don't understand, to people whose behaviors aren't changing, what can we do to teach the average person, to teach the teacher that the child that's acting up does not necessarily need to be expelled, they may need to be understood. Somebody needs to dig deeper. Sometimes the trauma is in the child didn't just come from the learned behaviors in home, but came from the learned trauma at home. How, again, do we teach the layperson? Because I submit there are ways to do it. How do we advocate to teach the parents, to teach the teachers and the police officers and everybody else that sometimes the behavior that you see is the cry for help?
Absolutely. Great question. And it all goes back again to communication, but what do you communicate? You want to be right communication, not just talking. And the thing about what we do, we used to have taboos. Remember taboos? We didn't want to talk about anything, so we kept it in the family. And we kept it in the home. So, and then, therefore, it goes out into the community and it's infectious. Now what we have to do is start opening up, start having true conversations with our children, our spouse, our husbands, wives, and whatever. We need to have to start having that conversation, only because it's damaging, it's toxic. There's this fine line there's a correlation rather, with mental health or mental illness and criminality.
Absolutely.
We are all dealing with something. There's PTSD, there's depression, there's anxiety and bipolar disorder, bipolar 1 and 2. There's all types of things that we're not talking about, because if you say something, all of a sudden you're crazy. We don't love enough. We don't talk. We don't talk about these issues that we're all going through, every last one of us. But we won't admit it. Until we have that conversation and admit it to ourselves, we can't go out and tell our babies that they need to do this, that, and the other, because they can see it in you. You're lying to me. So start opening up and having that dialogue. I think that's where it starts. That's where the communication starts there.
I would like to see more, and I don't even like to discuss the word in Prince George's County, but I would like to see more money, more funding put into mental health. Absolutely. It is a big problem. We have very, very, very few qualified doctors that we can send our children to. I can order a child and parent to counseling or therapy, but I gotta find one. And it is hard to do here in Prince George's County, and I will just throw this out there as we talk about the politicians. As I was talking to a couple of people earlier, you don't necessarily see this level of problem in Montgomery County, Howard County. I've gone to conferences and seminars and I felt totally embarrassed when I look at the things that they have put in place for their children. We need to learn to do it here. Our children, I believe, and I see it every day, mental health is gone so far over the cliff because there was nobody there, no resources there to stop it from happening.
Well, thank you again to this panel. It's just as dynamic, if not even more so than the previous, I must say. Again, I'm Tyrese Robinson. I'm actually a special education teacher here in Prince George's County. I've been teaching special education for the last 10, 11 years now. And one of the things that I've had difficulties with, especially being active again in the community, chair of the Youth and Recreation Committee, partnering with Maryland Parks and Planning as far as our community centers and keeping them open, is the lack of recreation activities for our children and also physical activities just to give them a chance to get some of those wiggles out, as we say in the classroom. I'd like to know if you can speak on the importance of physical fitness, because we've also talked about the mental fitness, particularly with our youth, basketball leagues and football leagues as ways to contact them and have that sort of mentor relationship, please.
One of the things that Kiamsha, when we talk to audiences, and I don't know if I'm going to really answer your question, but when we talk to audiences, we talk about how on Monday nights we have a full room and we not playing basketball and we not doing football because every child is not interested in that. And so I'm more focused with the teenagers, so I know the little ones, they definitely have to get their wiggles out, but the teenagers, sometimes it's tapping into my skill set. My skill set may be being a speaker and a leader off the court. And so how do we make sure that we're doing both? Because I believe that there is room for improvement in the recreational side, but there's absolutely room for improvement when you're talking about leadership skills, character development. So how do we make sure we're looking at both of those? And in doing that, which one doesn't cost? It doesn't cost to teach a child. So how do we make sure that we're holding our political people accountable for the money? But how do we make sure we're holding ourselves accountable for the relationship that has to happen?
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michelle Hudson, and I'm a resident of the Prince George County. I live in Bowie, and as you see, I brought my daughter, and I wanted to let you know, if we could talk about it all day, but if they're not in the room listening to it, it's nothing but us talking about it. And I want her to see I want you to see what your future is. Because she's a talented and gifted student. She's been in that program, and I try to make sure I get her exposure to this type of discussion. And at 13 years old, they're having this type of discussion amongst themselves. They know they're talking about Trump more than we probably are talking about Trump. And they got it nailed. They got it good before yeah, okay. But one of the things I wanted to bring and ask to this panel, and I wish the law officers were still here, mentioned about mental health, and we mentioned about how a child is acting out in school. One of the biggest causes for children to misbehave is because they're hungry. They are hungry. They may come home where the last time they ate was when they were at school, that lunch. And even their parents may have seen their parents go hungry so that they could have that sandwich. There are some good parents out here making some great sacrifices. So then you bring this kid into this environment of school where they have to sit and listen, and they have to be instructed, and they're sitting there thinking, but I'm hungry. So what do? No one's noticing me. I act out. So I just wanted to bring that to the forefront to see what your thoughts are on regarding helping deal with the hunger issues in the school.
I'll say briefly that kind of turning it around, one of the problems we find are those children that don't get proper nourishment, especially in the morning, and on the way to school, they stop at the 7-Eleven and they get a honey bun and a Coca-Cola. And I don't need to tell you what that means, especially when they begin to come down. I know there are free and reduced lunches, breakfasts that the school system does offer, and it is a problem. Indeed, it is a problem. Nourishment. Our young people and their diets are problems. We see it all the time. So my hope is that, again, more attention, more funding, if that's what it takes in that area, for the politicians to understand this is a big problem. It is difficult to communicate with a child who's listening to their stomachs. It's hard. I understand that.
It is so true. One of the things I've done as a commissioner is go to the restaurants here in the community and to partner with them, to partner with our schools or the community at large to supply food to our kids, because one of the things I know is that they are hungry. And it's hard because when they, like you said, when they go home from school, that's the last meal they're gonna have. And they come back and eat the breakfast and eat the meal that they have at school, and that's it. It is very, very difficult for a lot of our children, and I know a lot of them in our community. I've mentored 5 young men since 6th grade. They're now in 11th grade, doing well. It took a lot of my time, a lot of my effort, but it had to be done. They were wayward. They were on the wrong track. Brilliant, but we're on the wrong track. But I like to partner with the schools and the community restaurants and get food in our children's backpacks. When they go home, they have an apple and orange and something to keep them going to the next day.
I just wanted to quickly highlight one of the things I think we both mentioned, that when you work with the young person, you have to work with the families as well. So there are those situations where we check in with the kids because it may not be a mental health issue. That's where my social worker hat comes on. Whenever a child is hungry, you always have to check in with the family as well. At least that's my focus. You always have to check in with the family as well. Sometimes, situations are, kept on a hush-hush, but again, that's when you have to go deeper. You have to go that extra mile. You have to see what else is going on. So if it's a necessary referral you need to make, if it's a necessary go to the home and see what's kind of going on and see what you can do, because no, you're not gonna get nothing done if the child is hungry. That's a basic need. So that's something you have to do, and that's when you go that extra mile to make sure the family is also taken care of, because you're not just working with that child.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here, for giving us the opportunity to share our thoughts and to know what Prince George's County and the professionals are doing for our community. I live in District Heights. We have a problem of communication, I think. I think that you offer so many services, you have so many talents, but when people are in need, how do they reach out? There has to be some form, some communication where if I have this problem, I should be able to call someone directly, not call and be transferred or say, I don't handle it. I think if we can develop something with all the professionals, point of contact professionals that can, if they can't handle it, then they can direct us, because there's nothing worse than being in a bad situation or needing something and it's available, but you don't know how to obtain it. I just find one of the most important aspects is I'm fairly intelligent, and when I do need things, I'm able to reach out. But when I do, many times, the connections aren't made. And it's so very frustrating, especially for children, especially for people at risk. And as far as policing, and you just need a point of contact. We need something where we can go directly to the source to obtain the services we need, to participate, to know where we can. If you don't know, you can't do better. And sometimes they don't have the ability to know or to do better. So that's where the professionals come in hand.
Absolutely.
But we have to make it available for them at hand to say, I have this issue, I can pick up the phone, oh, so-and-so takes care of this issue. We're all over the place. It makes no sense because we have a dynamic county and everybody should be able to contact whatever their needs or get direction for that.
And you know, one of the things, and thank you for the question, Lori, Tennis Association Vice President, working in Woodland Springs. We have representatives from Woodland Springs, and I truly appreciate you being here. One of the biggest reasons why you got the Tennis Association together was to work in communication with the city and the community. So that's something that one of the biggest things that we're working on. I know you guys are still working on structure, getting things right. You guys have been dynamic, for real, and I truly appreciate you. But that's one of our biggest problems, communication. And it's been that way for a long time. And sometimes I'm thinking it's willful. Like, why are all these areas funded, but no one knows about them?
Exactly.
Then we lose money, lose the programs, lose interest, and we lose lives.
That's right. That's it.
Okay?
That's it.
People don't know what's going on. So, Lori, I truly, will address that, as you continue to talk to me, and we're going to handle it, because I'm going to not lose communication with these experts here on this stage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I want to say to you that everybody needs to realize how right you are. I got to tell you something that bothers me most times. We can't seem to get help, food, clothes, or for anybody else, or anything else, until that child gets into trouble. That child has almost got to get into trouble before all of those services become made known. And I'm telling you, I believe there's something wrong with that. I do. I don't think it's just a passing thing. It bothers me. They bring a child to me, and all of a sudden, I get all kinds of services that are available. What's the truth? If these services were made known before, maybe that child would have never came into my office. We've got to do something about, but it's back to the politics of it. Oh yeah, I told Aisha when she asked me to come here, I got to try to be calm. But y'all got some problems in Prince George's County. You do. And I'm going to tell you one of the reasons you have the problems you have in Prince George's County. Because this is the hardest place I can think of to have a line of communication. You don't know what's going on around the corner from you. You don't. You don't find out from the police unless something happened around the corner from you. The fire department comes out with the smoke detectors after the house is burned down. Everything is always afterwards. Afterwards. Something's wrong with that. But you know what? You all pay more taxes than anybody else in this area. Where your services at? So for your politicians, they need to give you those answers, and they need to tell you how they're going to bring about those changes. You don't need them coming telling you the same thing you just told them. Okay? You don't need that. This is the kind of thing that's got to stop. It frustrates me. I deal with hundreds of children every year, and it shouldn't be that way. They should never come to me. I tell most of the parents and the child, you have no reason to be sitting before me. Something else is wrong.
Hi, good evening again, Raymond again. Thank you, you hit key points. There's a disconnect between the parents and the street and the children. A serious disconnect. As adults, we know hurt people hurt people. No, it's just simple. I gotta reflect back on what I said earlier. My incident is over a child not being corrected, where it blew up out of control, okay? Eventually, this case is gonna come in front of your desk, because I'd rather have it dealt with socially or civilly than have a child parent in trouble for on their record or whatever. It can be dealt with other ways. There's a fear in us for our daggone children. We fear them. Why? My son is 25 years old. He's a college graduate. He's never been in front of the police. He's from the streets of New York. My stepdaughter, 22 years old, in college, working, social, no problems. But we see little children who I watched grow up who weren't allowed to get into these free programs so that they can have structure in them off hours. I don't see that down here. There's no structure, there's nothing free. Our kids have nothing to do in their off hours. If you find something to do in their off hours, they have a structure after school where they stay out of trouble. They might get a meal at that program so that when they go home, their stomachs aren't growling and their homework is done. Now they know they may not get breakfast, but at least they know when they get to school, they got lunch. Okay, there's answers, you know, but people have to be willing to put boots on the ground. I've volunteered, I've mentored, I've done things that help kids. Okay, right now I'm close to that down here because of what happened to me. I can't help because I'm afraid that this little monster is gonna come back and do something because they're angry because their mommy and daddy ain't talking to them the way that I am. I talk directly to people, I don't talk around in circles. That's the problem. We coddle when they need to get their butt spanked. Okay? And I know that's totally against what you want done. But if you spare the rod, you spoil your child.
I'll say this to you, a number of things, and I'll give it to the doctor.
But with that, I thank y'all for allowing me to speak. I had a great time. I got what I wanted to say out. I wish more men would stand up and talk tonight because this is what we're listening. This is why I'm here. Metal sharpens metal, guys.
And we need to respond to those. Next question.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Wanda Ollie, and I'm a resident of Prince George's County.
What's your name again? Speak up. I want to know your name.
Oh, you know what? I can talk loud
Come
now.
on, send it to me. Send it
I'm
out
just
there.
trying to, you know. Okay, my name is Wanda Ollie, and I'm a resident of Prince George's County. I've been a resident since about 2005, and I have seen so many changes in the area where I live, which is Woodland Springs. Now, as Lori said, we have formed a tenant association, and we are looking for people to come to our meetings to share what you all shared today. That's what we need. I don't have a problem walking up to a child if I see them doing something wrong. I am not afraid, okay? And so if each of us open our mouths just to say, hi, how you doing? I do that all the time. To the young girls out here, to the teenagers, if we see them shooting crap, we walk up on them. Lori and I walked up on at least 15 of them the other day. This is not acceptable. Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm sorry. And they moved. They moved. We get respect because we give them respect. Okay? And what we want in our neighborhood is for people like you to come and help us to help them. That's it.
I will give it to the commissioner because that's what the commissioner does. But I want to say to everybody in here, I give you the same challenge that you got from the representative from Kiamsha, and this is what community-based organizations are supposed to do. Come out and see us. Come see us. Come and see what we do, how we do it, and how you can help. I think that we would want to bring whatever we're doing in one part of the county, we'd like to take it to another part of the county. We need to stop reinventing wheels in Prince George's County. That is a big problem. I've worked with Kiamsha. I know what she does. I know what Barbara Dunn does. Call us. And if you don't believe us, come see for yourself. That's what I want you to do. Let me show you what we can do in your neighborhoods. We've got great people in Prince George's County. We've got great volunteers in Prince George's County. We've got a ton of talent. Come see us.
And the only reason, oh,
Let me say
Belinda,
something.
you had a
How
question.
you
I
doing?
apologize.
No, not a question, but just a comment as I was coming in and listening to people talking, and the lady was talking about respect. This generation definitely is different. They do demand respect. It's not like when we were growing up where you had to earn respect. The children are a little different, and I think we need to treat them different. And as the mother said about her child, they are our future. They are the next generation. They are the ones that's going to be next police officers, doctors, lawyers. They're the ones that was going to be a communicator, the politician. If we don't take care of our babies in this generation now, we are going to have a problem. As a mother of 3, stepmother of 9, 11 foster kids that I have guardianship of, some bipolar, some ADHD, I had to figure this stuff out by myself. I had these kids in my house messing up my house that I work hard for. We're talking about stabbing stuff, hitting stuff. Most people would have said, let the state take their kids back. But I kept them because I loved them, and I had to figure it out. And I'm looking at the problem even with the schools. It's hard for teachers to have so many kids when some of them do have bipolar, some of them do have ADHD, some of them do have issues, and yeah, it's because some of the food, it's some of the love and domestic violence and things going in the home, but how do we get them what they need when teachers are trying to teach so many kids with so many different issues? We have to work at that. I had to learn from one of my, especially with the worst one, after her, I said, no more foster kids for me. But, but I had to learn, she loves to dance. She's very creative with dancing. She's very creative with working with singers, but she has big issues. But when I put her mind toward what she loves to do, she's great at it. So you have to learn, and you have to learn these kids, and you have to know them. But how can teachers teach and do that when they have 30 kids, and among 30 kids, you have 2 or 3 of them with issues, and they all in the same classroom. They're all in the same classroom.
Absolutely. And look, this is just the start of our conversation. Clearly there is a lot that we have to unpack in our communities. We know that we have dealt with a lot of trauma. We know that many of our kids and adults have PTSD. We know that teachers and those who are trying to provide some instruction and curriculum for these young people are facing a lot. But guess what? We all have to get it right because our children are so important to us. They are literally our future. They're going to be taking care of us when we get older. So we all collectively have to get it right for them. So what this panel was designed to do was talk about sort of what they're doing right now in our communities. What we have to collectively do is figure out what policies do we need to change, what funding do we need to push for in order to address the issues that you heard about today. Most of these groups do what they do for very little in terms of resources that they get from the county and from the state. But what they are saving the county and the state on the back end is exponential. We need to figure out how to quantify that so that groups who are actually working in our communities, doing things positive, making a difference, are given the resources they need so that they can reach a greater amount of people in our communities. The time is late. We're a little past our 9 o'clock stop time, so I am going to have to end. I did want to say hello to my good friend, former chief of Capitol Heights, Tony Ayers. And I want to thank all of you, including my parents, who stayed through the entire thing, so thank you, Mom and Dad. And I especially want to thank Anthony Jones, who put the panels and this program together. Thank you so much, Mr. Jones, along with Commissioner Jonathan Medlock, Tyrese Robinson, who you heard from earlier today, and a few others who I think also came here. Oh, Niecy Draper. Okay, I didn't see Niecy. Okay, Niecy Draper, thank you so much for also being here. And I know that there, like LaJoya, who worked the door for us. I want to thank you, and also Octavia Caldwell, who was at the door, Troy Lowe, who was making sure that we got everything taped and pictures and all that. So you'll follow us on Facebook. You'll see us. I see Henry Floyd in the back, and also Judy Danso, who was around here. So there are several people who worked on this, along with Deborah Harrington, who worked to make this happen. So we really want to thank you for this. We will follow up with you. We will provide information on each of these speakers, because what they asked you to do was come see them. And I'm going to challenge us all in this room to come to their program, to see their programs and get to meet the young people that they are working with. We need to do that. And then if those of you who are out there in the audience, if you have a need in your community that you believe that these groups and these individuals represented here can help you with, please reach out to them. So I will provide you with their contact information. If you signed it over here, if you provided your email address, I'll make sure that you have all the information, along with the second annual Faith and Mental Health Conference that Reverend Jamila Woods-Jones is spearheading. Again, this is just the beginning. We're going to have more conversations. We're going to have teletown halls. We're going to get this right. And I really appreciate all of you who stayed. We had, of course, a few more people before the hour got late, but I really want to thank all of you who stayed. I think we all got something out of it, and I think we all have a charge for the future. So thank you so much, and have a great evening.